Gavin Lawson started his day with the mundane task of fixing a light bulb. And the next moment he stepped into a dimension where fluorescence, the stench of mold, and hallway after hallway stretched for eternity. Gavin is proof that the backrooms aren't reserved for those who live behind a computer screen. For Gavin, the myth bled into reality in the blink of an eye. Maintenance was called first thing that morning. A power outage took out most of the fluorescent lights on the 4th floor, and now Gavin, the only one on call that Monday, was stuck fixing the entire floor's lights all by himself. Every office he'd entered was met with annoyance from upper management figures, like it was somehow his fault that the lights crapped out on everyone. But at least now he was fiddling in an empty conference room, where there was no one to scowl at him from behind an overpriced desk. He'd finished the first 2 sets of tubes and was working on the final set when the hallway outside went quiet. The sounds of telephones ringing, secretaries chatting, and the click-clack of high heels just flicked off as suddenly as the lights he was currently working on. Gavin didn't take much heed at first. Everyone must have gone out to lunch early. Or maybe they decided to take the day off in the semi-darkness, since most of the lights hadn't been changed yet. But as the minutes ticked by, the silence became more pronounced, heavier. Gavin realized he couldn't even hear the cars that had just been whizzing by outside a few minutes ago. Just complete, utter, deathly silence. By the time he screwed in the last of the tubes, the silence was downright oppressive. He climbed down from his ladder, leaned it against the wall alongside his toolbox, and decided that he needed an early lunch after all, and maybe a cold splash of water over his face and neck to get rid of the sudden goosebumps that had erupted all over his body. He opened the door to an empty hallway, but not just empty of people. Empty of everything. No pictures on the walls. The long boxes of fluorescent bulbs he'd put outside the door were gone. No windows, and even the electrical outlets from the wall had vanished. Just an endless hallway to his right and left sides. Blank walls, one office door after another. White ceilings and carpets that were a shade of brown that reminded him of those thin glued-on carpets in cheap apartments back when he was a kid. He walked to the first door. Inside was a completely empty room. Same carpet, same walls, and no windows. But he'd just been in here 20 minutes ago. There were cheap Jackson Pollock knockoff paintings on the walls, and the fat man behind the desk had so many pictures of his family that there was barely any room for his computer. But now the place was just empty. It smelled like mold and that dry, dusty smell you get in libraries. Gavin was breathing hard when he opened the door to the conference room he'd just exited. It wasn't a conference room anymore. It was an empty office, just like the one Gavin came from. His toolbox, with his phone, and the ladder were gone. For every one of the other 24 rooms in the hallway, the story was the same. Empty. 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 Every door he opened led to the same blank, windowless room, and the anxious spit stains beneath his arms grew wider with each new door. He was sweating bullets and breathing like a pig by the time he reached the end of the hallway that ended with a stairway leading up and down. A wave of relief washed over him. Even if this was some sick prank, every building on Earth had a starting point. Go down far enough and he'd eventually reach the ground floor. That was just fact. Gavin stopped at each floor going down, looking down the new floor's hallway. only to be met with identical carpets, the same overwhelming stench of mold and dry paper, and an endless series of evenly spaced doors. He didn't waste time checking those rooms. He knew what waited behind each one of them. First flight of stairs, then the next, and the next, and the next. The ever-increasing panic was kept at bay only because he forced his feet to keep moving, but even a reasonably collected man like Gavin could only take so much of this bizarre set of circumstances. Before the hysterics could rob him of any semblance of logic, he sat down on the bottom step with his head between his knees, breathing slowly. But his moment of reprieve was short-lived. Between his heartbeat pounding inside his skull and his heavy breathing, he heard something out of place. Footsteps. Muffled thumps somewhere below him. "Hello?" The footsteps stopped abruptly. "Hello? Anyone there? I need help. Where are you?" Gavin was sure he hadn't imagined it. He ran down the next flight of stairs, checked every blank room on that floor, and called out for the person that made the footsteps. He found nothing. When he went down the 12th flight of stairs, he went down quietly and slowly, straining his ears. There it was again. As quietly as he could, he went down farther. But then he came to the end of that stairwell. The footsteps were below him again. So he followed them down 3 more flights of stairs. Every time the footsteps were a floor below him. But there was more to this than just a phantom walking around. Gavin had now gone down 15 flights of stairs. This building only had 8 floors. Actually, now that he thought about it, after 15 flights of stairs, his mouth should have been dry as bone. Yet he wasn't thirsty. Not that he was ungrateful. He hadn't found a single bathroom on any of the floors he'd stopped to investigate. His panic was replaced by dread. This was wrong. All deeply, dreadfully wrong. Reality didn't work like this. And suddenly he knew. Whoever was making those footsteps, he wasn't supposed to reach them. Whatever he did, he needed to avoid whatever person or thing was making them. Whatever this place was, those footsteps were as much a part of the building as the musty carpets were. When the realization hit him, a cold shiver ran down his neck. His fingers went numb, and the world around him began to warp. The walls undulated with every muffled footstep echoing from below. The fluorescent hum from the dim lights sang like cicadas. As objectively quiet as everything was, it still felt like an overwhelming barrage of noise beating into his ears. His confusion was short-lived, however. Before he could think through the panic, a phone rang in the distance. Gavin ran, yanking open every door in that hallway, searching desperately for the source. Behind the 8th door he found it. An old dial-up phone sat in the middle of another blank carpeted room. It had no electrical cord connected to a power source. But Gavin wasn't taking in the perplexing details at that moment. He needed to talk to the person on the other side of that line, get out of here, and stop it from ringing before the footsteps came for the phone too. Hello?
Hello, Mr. Lawson. This is System Control. Welcome to the Backrooms. We hope your stay here has been pleasant.
Who is this? And how do I get out of here?
The objective is not to escape, Mr. Lawson. The objective is avoidance. Your advantages are exemption from hunger, thirst, and exhaustion. Your disadvantages are your human limitations to speed and the human system's weakness to stress. The Harbinger has the advantage of expert hearing. He does not, however, have the ability of sight, taste, smell, or any additional sensory assets.
Harbinger? Who's the Harbinger? What the hell in the Saw movie game are you playing at, woman?
There is no game, Mr. Lawson. You need to show us the limitations of human endurance. You will fail. That is inevitable. The point is just to see how long it takes.
Let me out! What sick freaks are you people?
I do not understand that question, Mr. Lawson. Enjoy your stay in the Backrooms. We will reconvene every 6 hours. You have been making an inordinate amount of noise. The Harbinger is on his way. When he finds you, the simulation ends. Good luck, Mr. Lawson.
We call it the Backrooms. But names are just placeholders for things we can't explain. Gavin thought he was fixing a light bulb. He didn't realize he was stepping into a system designed to consume him. The silence, the hum, the footsteps, they aren't accidents. They're functions. Listen closely. Do you hear it? That faint hum behind your own walls. The creak of footsteps when no one's home. The Backrooms aren't a myth. They're waiting. And when you slip, even for a second, they'll archive you too.